Have you ever witnessed a moment where the truth flipped everything upside down? Share your thoughts in the comments. Stick around. This story is about to take a shocking turn. Let's dive into what happened next. I had always believed in the justice system. I trusted the process, the laws, the idea that truth would always find a way to prevail. But today, sitting in this dimly lit courtroom, I felt something shift inside me. Something unsettling, something that whispered that maybe, just maybe, the system wasn't as fair as I had always believed. My name is Daniel Grayson. I'm just an ordinary man, a husband, a father, a claims adjuster in the insurance business. I don't make waves. I follow the rules. And yet here I was, one of 12 jurors tasked with deciding the fate of a man who, from the moment he rolled into this courtroom, seemed to have already lost. His name was Michael Rainey, a black man in his 40s, sitting motionless in a wheelchair, hands resting in his lap, his expression unreadable. The charges against him? Fraud. They said he had forged documents, stolen money from the government, manipulated the system for his own gain. I looked at him, tried to read something, guilt, fear, remorse, but he gave nothing away. No trembling hands, no pleading eyes. Just silence. Watching. Then there was Judge Harold Stokes. From the moment he stepped into the room, Stokes radiated authority, a man who had spent years bending others to his will. He was tall, commanding, and sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. But there was something else, too. Something cold, detached, like he had already decided the verdict long before this trial had even begun. I felt it in the way he spoke to Michael, like a man speaking to someone beneath him, someone whose fate had already been sealed. And then there was Leonard Wallace, the prosecutor, a man in a perfectly tailored suit, his voice smooth, persuasive. Every word he spoke carried the weight of certainty. He laid out the evidence seamlessly, effortlessly, too effortlessly. There were no holes, no contradictions. It was as if the case had been pre-packaged, wrapped up neatly with a bow, waiting to be signed, sealed, and delivered. I glanced at the other jurors. Some nodded along with Wallace's words, their faces blank, resigned. Others fidgeted, casting uneasy glances around the room. But no one spoke. No one questioned anything. The air felt thick, heavy. It wasn't fear exactly. No one had threatened us. But there was an unspoken truth hanging over the room. This case was already decided. The jury was just here to play along. Michael sat there listening unmoving. Judge Stokes smirked at him from the bench, a glint of amusement in his eyes, as if daring him to fight back, knowing full well he couldn't win. I swallowed hard. Something about this didn't feel right. But in Stokes' courtroom, what felt right didn't matter. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I was here to deliver justice or just to witness an execution. Wallace stepped forward, adjusting his pristine cufflinks before addressing the jury. His every move was precise, deliberate, like a man who had already won. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "The evidence speaks for itself." He gestured toward a neatly stacked pile of documents on the prosecution's table. They were pristine, no creases, no notes scribbled in the margins, no signs of rushed handling. Too perfect. He flipped open the top file and held up a set of financial records for the jury to see. "These are the falsified government aid forms," he declared, each one signed by the defendant, Michael Rainey. Each one a lie. His words carried weight, sinking into the room like stones dropping into still water. A calculated pause followed, giving the jury time to absorb the alleged crime. I shifted in my seat. The numbers on the papers aligned too neatly. The transactions traced back to Michael's name with an unnerving precision. No errors, no contradictions. Everything fit together too well. Real cases didn't work like that. There were always inconsistencies, messy details, small gaps, something that didn't quite add up. Investigations were never this spotless. But here, there wasn't a single loose thread to pull. Wallace turned to Michael, stepping closer, his eyes sharp, his voice taking on a subtle edge. "Mr. Rainey, do you deny that these documents bear your signature?" Michael didn't flinch. "I don't deny that my name is on them." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Wallace smiled, a small, triumphant smirk, sensing victory. Then you admit to the fraud, he pressed. Michael exhaled slowly, his gaze steady. I admit that someone wanted it to look that way. Silence. For the first time, Wallace's confidence wavered, if only for a fraction of a second. Judge Stokes, who had been observing like a king on his throne, leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Let me get this straight, Stokes drawled, tapping a finger against his desk. Are you saying that these official government documents with your signature, your fingerprints, were fabricated? Michael met his gaze without hesitation. That's exactly what I'm saying. The room tensed. A few jurors exchanged glances. I felt my pulse quicken. I looked down at the stack of pristine files, at the flawless evidence, and suddenly a thought crept into my mind. A thought I hadn't dared to entertain before. What if he was telling the truth? And worse, what if we were all being played? For the first time in that courtroom, power shifted. Not visibly, not audibly, but it was there, a subtle shift in the weight of the air. Michael wasn't afraid. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't trying to convince anyone. And that was what made it so powerful. Then, as the entire room sat in stunned silence, Michael did something that shattered every assumption. Something that changed everything. He stood up, not wobbly, not struggling. He rose with quiet strength, unfolding himself from the seat like a man who had never belonged there in the first place. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Someone in the back dropped a pen. One of the jurors let out a choked sound. Wallace took a step back, his confidence crumbling. Judge Stokes snapped backward, clutching the wooden bench as if bracing for impact. For the first time, he looked afraid. Michael reached into his pocket. For a split second, no one reacted. The shock of seeing him on his feet had stolen every ounce of logic from the room. But as his hand emerged, gripping something small and metallic, I saw Stokes' fingers twitch toward his gavel, as if he still believed he could silence this. He couldn't. Michael flipped open the badge in his hand. Michael Rainey, Special Agent, United States Department of Justice. The silence shattered. And in that moment, we all realized Michael Rainey was never the one on trial. Judge Harold Stokes was.